What's going on, everyone? So we just got a brand new leader spoiled, and it is absurd. It does come out as an upgrade for one resource, and we're gonna dive straight into it with a big thank you from my patrons, or for my patrons over on Patreon, as well as make sure to pick up these cards with my TCG player link. Let's dive right into it, guys. Poe Dameron, new one cost leader. Realistically, this is pretty crazy, to be honest. I think this has amazing potential. Amazing potential. So we have an aggression heroism leader with an action to pay one resource. You flip this leader and attach him as an upgrade to a friendly vehicle unit without a pilot on it. Essentially, you can pilot him for one resource, which is incredible. Now, mind you, this is not an epic action, which is extremely relevant. Now, he does flip as a 4/6 unit for the 5, or if you do happen to use that front side action, he will deploy as a 2+2/+1 pilot on whatever vehicle that doesn't have a pilot on it already. And you can also pay 1 to kind of move him around on different vehicles. At least once per round. So first off, that is incredibly insane. The idea behind this is you have a one cost leader, or I should say a one cost pilot at your disposal throughout the game. Because what happens here is you pay the 1, you attach it to a vehicle, suddenly you got +2/+1 on that vehicle, and if that vehicle dies, Poe Dameron just goes back into the leader zone, which means you can use him, albeit exhausted that turn, but the following turn, reuse that action and put him on another vehicle, which means at any point, if you have a vehicle, you can get +2/+1 for one resource on that vehicle, which is incredibly strong. Incredibly strong. And then there's even another dynamic to this, which is, let's say you're going like aggression, cunning, heroism, and you're going all space. Well, you can pilot him onto one vehicle, attack with it, and then move this upgrade to another vehicle and then attack with that one. Now, you can only do it once per round, but still, that allows you to essentially pay 1 to get +2 damage in that sense, which is incredibly strong. Now, there's another card that's new that works really well with Poe Dameron. We'll talk about that one in just a moment. But we essentially have a one-cost leader because you don't really see the unit side of things all that often. Now, it is also important to remember that you can go ahead and still use that epic action. Now, mind you, this epic action is if you control 5 or more resources, deploy this leader as a unit. It doesn't look like you can go ahead and deploy him as a pilot through the epic action. Not that you would really want to, but let's say you are in a situation where you go ahead and you're using his action and then he dies, he comes back. Next turn, you got 5 resources. You just deploy him out as a unit. You can just get in for 4 damage immediately. 5 resource 4/6, by the way, which is actually a pretty good stat line. It's a pretty good stat line. I would be pretty okay with that in an aggressive deck who wants to close out the game pretty quickly, uses front side action in the early turns, maybe trade off, get him back in the leader zone, and then boom, deploy him on 5, get in for more damage. This looks incredible. I've played a lot with pilots recently, and aggression heroism is obviously at home for him because we already have so many amazing vehicles, space units in particular, in the heroism options that we have. But even just aggression heroism, things like A-Wing is a super common one. We have the Millennium Falcon in cunning. We've got things like Red 3. We've got the early space units in heroism like Cartel Turncoat, which can be really quite excellent in some of those decks. But overall, you just have a lot of options, and these pilots, even in something like Sabine Green, which I've been playing recently, work really well. They just work really, really well. You just get to go ahead and do some early game chipping in for some damage, maybe get in more damage than you expect because you get to keep a unit alive. And then later on in the game, you probably have lost them, but it doesn't matter because your pilot's already gotten in some damage. So Poe Dameron being a guaranteed +2/+1, which is basically what all these pilots are at any point for one resource, is crazy. It is crazy. I think it is quite strong. The question is, how does it compare to some of the other options that you have, right? Because aggression heroism is a tricky one to battle into because Sabine exists, right? You have Luke now, which are some very strong options. You got Han too, which is still pretty good. I've been very impressed with Luke in the space strategy, and obviously Poe Dameron is going to want to go in the space strategy. I will say this, Sabine is certainly going to be her own deck because Sabine Green, Sabine ECL, it's almost assuredly the best iteration of that style of aggressive deck. One that's going into ground and into space with the Rebel synergies. Poe Dameron and Luke have a chance to break in as space decks, where you really want a bunch of vehicles so you could take advantage of those abilities from Luke and from Poe Dameron. In Luke's case, fighters, but most of the time your fighters are vehicles as well. And so they both kind of fit in the same strategy. So which one will actually do more work? I am kind of curious to see. I think Poe Dameron has a good shot of being very consistent, and then Luke potentially having some higher upside, both of which seem pretty good, honestly. So very cool with Poe Dameron. But as I said, we have some other cards to talk about, and some of them specifically working with Poe Dameron, like Black 1. This is a 2-cost space unit in aggression heroism. It's a 2/3, and when it's upgraded, it gets +1/+0. If you control Poe Dameron as a unit, upgrade, or leader, you may deal 1 damage to a unit. So first things first, it is not a rebel. That is an extremely relevant piece of text. One of the big things with a lot of these space decks and just aggressive decks in general is you can take advantage of Wing Leader in the aggression heroism, and also potentially Fleet Lieutenant or things like Rebel Assault if you are going in that direction, all of which do not work with Black 1. So that is a big downside. But this is a really insane card. Just look at the cost. 2 costs for a 2/3. That's already reasonable, right? X-Wing was being played and still is being played every once in a while in my Sabine decks or in others' Sabine decks, mainly because it has the Rebel tag and is a 2/3 baseline space unit. This one, it's a 2/3. If you have Poe Dameron in your deck, you have a 2/3 that deals 1 damage on attack to a unit. If you have Poe Dameron in your deck, you can go turn 1 Black 1, turn 2, put a pilot on this guy, and suddenly this is a 5/4 deal 1 on attack. A 5/4 on attack. Deal 1. That is quite strong. And you don't even need Poe Dameron, right? Any deck with pilot synergies. Turn 1, Black 1. Turn 2, put an R2D2 on it. Play a 3-cost space unit. Suddenly, you got a 4/4. You got a 4/4. That's good. It's just another option to play on turn 1 that's going to be quite strong. I think Black 1 is really going to do some work. Next up, we've got Eject. This is another one that I think with Poe Dameron could do some major work. 2-cost event, detach a pilot, upgrade, move it to the ground arena as a unit, and exhaust it, draw a card. So the idea here is turn 1, you play some unit. Turn 2, let's say you play Black 1 turn 1. Turn 2, you put Poe Dameron on your Black 1. You attack in for 5. You then play Eject, which then creates a 4/6 Poe Dameron leader in the ground arena. Get to draw a card, and then you get to go ahead and keep your 2/3 space unit. Something like that. Similar to how like the Now There Are Two of Them's work, where you just have to have the right setup and you're just absolutely sitting pretty. This looks like it has some potential in certain decks. In general, the best things that you can really do is play like an expensive unit. I'm thinking like Chewbacca, you put it as 3 costs, you eject it, and you've got, an interesting thing happening there where it's a 5/6 and you get the value of the +3/+3, you get to save a unit, and then you get the 5/6, I suppose. Honestly, though, when I'm thinking about things like that, what I tend to lean towards is cheap pilots. Like turn 1, you play a space unit, Turn 2, you put the pilot on one of those units, you get in damage, and then you eject that pilot, and it's got like it's a 3-cost body or whatever, which is totally reasonable. Like Biggs, for example. Obviously, Poe Dameron is the by far best example, because even if Poe Dameron dies, guess what? You can do it again. You can do it again. And mind you, if he dies, you still can use an epic action and deploy him again, even if he dies as a unit, which is incredible. It seems very interesting to me, and I do think that there is some pretty interesting combo potential there. But that's not all. We've got the new 27 HP base as well. My goodness, again, you might realize why I'm making a video. Oh, come on, camera, come back to me. Because we just got so many things. 1-cost leader, some incredible space options, and a new base. This one, draw 3 more cards in your starting hand. You cannot take a mulligan. When the first action phase starts, you put 3 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck in any order. So the idea behind this is turn 1, you essentially get 3 additional cards to choose from in order to choose which ones to resource and which ones to keep to set up for the first few turns. Now, you still end up with the same cards in hand. So this essentially is pay 3 life, be able to manipulate your draw a little bit on turn 1. I don't think, based on a lot of the cutting decks that we're seeing out there, that this is going to be a very popular option. Obviously, I think the biggest one that you'd have to think about is Double Yellow Han. It is currently the most popular deck in the meta. It is the strongest deck in the meta by any metric. It is really, really good. Would that want Nabat Village here? I don't necessarily think that the 3 HP matters a whole lot. And in most matchups, and I think Han Yellow does benefit from getting a little bit deeper into the deck to find its combo elements. So that is an advantage. On another note, do we care about that 3 HP in other matchups? Certainly. So the trade-off of 3 HP really depends on what sort of decks you are fighting. If you're playing Han Yellow, you usually have a decent amount of disruption, and you're mainly a ground-based deck. Yes, you have Millennium Falcons, big and small. You've got the Ozatug Liberator gunship, which can do some work, and absolutely can clear out some space units. But you're generally not actually dominating the space arena. You are dominating the ground arena with your advanced ground units. And then using your 7-drops like Han and Enfys to push out and control the ground even more, or even just start tempoing them out. And so in decks that are going a lot into space and are very, very aggressive, those 3 HP points will matter. So it's a matter of, is the 3 HP matchups where it's worth the 3 HP, or you'd rather have the 30 HP, are those more frequent than the matchups where you don't want the 3 HP? And I think that you would say Sabine, Django Rad, decks like that are a little bit more popular, and therefore you'd want 3 HP, which I think makes it so that you don't really want it in Han. But I think it does have some potential, and it is very interesting. And they're kind of doing this with all of the new bases. Colossus being a really high HP base at 35 HP, which has been quite strong, by the way, but you lose a card. Your aggression base making your deck size smaller, your command base making your deck size bigger, and your cutting base making it so that you have like this extra potential in the early game, which is kind of cool at the cost of a little bit of HP. This like deck manipulations theme of these bases is quite interesting to me. But that's not all. We've got another space unit to talk about, and this one looks pretty interesting as well. It's a 3-cost space unit in just Heroism. It's a 3/3 Rebel Vehicle Fighter Spectre, and on attack, if you control Vigilance, Command, Aggression, or a Cunning unit, you will do something different. Vigilance is going to heal 2 from a base. Command is going to give an experience token to a unit. Aggression is going to deal 1 damage to a unit or base, and your Cunning is going to exhaust already a resource. So a 3-cost 3/3 in space, kind of mediocre. Now, if you have another unit, that's where it becomes a lot more interesting. Now, it does have the Rebel tag, which is very relevant. And it does have the Spectre tag, which I suppose can work with Sabine or Hera. Right? You could play it for no aspect penalty, but it's a heroism card, so it doesn't even matter. No. Unlucky. But the idea is you play it in Hera, then you can play Ezra, Kain, and Sabine, and all that good stuff in the same deck. Now, let's evaluate each of these modes. Vigilance, it becomes Restore 2. Okay. That's probably not good enough. We've seen Consortium Star Viper, even with the Restore 2, oftentimes not being good enough, especially with the 3/4s out there. The command portion of it, you get to give an experience token to a unit. Now, this is interesting because you can give it to itself on the attack, making it a 4/4. I think that's probably one of the stronger things to do. The aggression is dealing 1 damage to unit or base, kind of like a Sabine unit. The 1 damage to a base makes it a 4/3 for 3, which isn't incredibly strong. And then dealing 1 damage to a unit, it could have some applications here and there, but not exactly that strong, to be honest. The biggest one is exhausting or readying a resource. That is, at least in my opinion, the strongest option you can do. You can either disrupt your opponent or use up just a little bit of extra resources in your own resource pile. And we've seen this with Boba Fett. No surprise there, guys. It is a strong ability to do or to have. And of course, if you happen to have multiple aspect units, then it gets even crazier, right? Like if you have a Sabine and a Battlefield Marine on the battlefield, suddenly you're dealing 1 damage to a unit or base and you're giving an experience token to a unit. That can be pretty strong. So they definitely are encouraging you to try to get as many units of other aspects in there as possible. But that's not all. We've got another one in Guerilla Soldier. This one's less exciting. It's a 3-cost ground unit in Cunning. It's a 2/3 fringe vehicle or a fringe Twilight Trooper. When played, you deal 3 damage, indirect damage to a player if a base is assigned damage this way. Ready this unit. So you play this, deal 3 damage to a player. They're probably going to take some number of that because 3 damage to a player. And if they don't assign anything to their base, they're probably going to lose their unit, which means you get a 3 resource ground unit, 2/3 that readies up immediately and deals a little bit of damage to their base or just kills off a unit, which probably won't happen because your opponent will just take some portion of it to their base, some portion of it to their unit, and then they'll just let you get in for 2. It's okay. Maybe in an indirect damage deck, this could be something interesting. A 2/3 for 3 is pretty weak, but it does ready up immediately, so it could provide a little bit of a dynamic to that deck, which could do some work, but I'm not super impressed by Guerilla Soldier right now, at least. And then, I believe lastly, we have Stay on Target. It's a 2-cost event in aggression. You attack with a vehicle unit, it gets +2/+0 and gains when this unit deals damage to a base. Draw a card. Pretty good. It is like Heroic Sacrifice, but with an extra cost, because you're going to be oftentimes hitting a base, which means you are going to draw a card and get the +2/+0. But Heroic Sacrifice is able to be used with any unit, whereas this is vehicle. And of course, this is 2-cost event. Not sure how this compares to things like Heroic Sacrifice or Trench Run, which are in the same aspects, although those ones are heroism ones. This one, I suppose, can be used outside of heroism, which is interesting. But +2/+0, I think I'd rather, in general, have like a Breaking In or a Surprise Strike. Saboteur is pretty nice. And in heroism, I think I'd rather oftentimes have Heroic Sacrifice because it's a little bit cheaper, and that could be relevant. But if we're playing an all-vehicle deck, all-space deck, I think this has potential, especially since going ahead and getting a card draw isn't irrelevant. And I suppose the biggest advantages to this over like Heroic Sacrifice or Trench Run is that you're guaranteed to have your unit around afterwards, assuming you're not getting in a combat with another unit, right? You just use this kind of like a Surprise Strike or Breaking In, pay 2 resources, get in extra damage, keep your unit around. They still have to deal with it, which is interesting. So I think it has potential in some of those decks. But that's going to be it, guys. My goodness, a 1-cost leader, the new 27 HP base. There's a lot of things going on. These 3 cards, Poe Dameron, Black One, and Eject, I think has a massive amount of potential in the game. I'm really excited to play around with Poe Dameron. I think this guy is going to be pretty interesting to see. And I'm curious to hear what you all have to say. So let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, everyone. And I'll see you all for the next one.